Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Christian Duke from StrengthAddicts.com here in Kentucky, and it's February 25th, 2015, and I want to talk about the much anticipated Floyd Mayweather Jr. Manny Pacquiao fight scheduled for May of this year. I used to be a huge boxing fan. I still am to a certain degree, but I think certain things have really killed the sport, and if not killed it, severely hindered it from what it really is capable of, which is the number one full contact sport in the world. MMA, with all due respect to Dana White and the great cards they put on, should not be in the zip code of boxing. Boxing is a sport that's been around for hundreds of years, with such champions like Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, Rocky Marciano, even Iron Mike Tyson, Holyfield, Lennox Lewis. just Klitschko. Just amazing champions. The reality of it is that boxing has been allowed to destroy itself because of its own, flaws. One bigger flaw is that it's corrupt. I'm not going to name names, I'm not going to name judges, but there are decisions that just kind of leave you scratching your head. There are promoters, some that are pretty, obvious, that are essentially nothing but gangsters. And I don't even mean it in an organized crime fashion. I mean just shameless hustlers that have, essentially exploited these boxers. They're penniless today, yet these promoters are, living in the lap of luxury. But aside from that, the fact that there are so many belts, this is a major problem. And I'm not saying that we need to have one belt, but the fact that, for example, if you want to, let's go to the light heavyweight championship. You want to be the light heavyweight champion of the world. Well, which champion do you want to be? There's the WBF, there's the WBA, there's the IBA, the IBF, the ring, and there may even be more belts. What if you have 3 out of 5 belts, or 4 out of 7, or 3 out of 6? You're not the, you are not the uncontested, number one, unanimous, whatever, champion of the world. You could potentially have 6 different world champions at one weight class. And that's really confusing. And that's not always good for the sport. It's also kind of ridiculous that a person has to win 6 or 7 belts, to be the number one in the world. The other issue that I have with boxing is, let's say, for example, you are the number one. Let's say you're the WBA light heavyweight champion of the world, hypothetically, okay? And let's say you got this Irish kid. Let's say an Irish kid, because Irish kids usually fight pretty well. Let's say you got this Irish kid. He's the number one contender. He, destroys anything in sight. He'll go the full 12 rounds. He'll never give up. But you know what? The champion would rather fight a power puff, or would rather fight, some stand-in, maybe a 50-year-old guy that could barely stand up, whatever. He would rather fight George Foreman on the comeback than fight this Irish kid, because he knows this Irish kid would TKO him in the first round. In boxing, the champion can do that. The champion can tell this up-and-coming number one contender, I'm not going to give you a title fight. Or, I will give you a fight, but it won't be a title fight. You can do that in boxing. Or, you can never fight that number one contender, ignore him until someone else beats him, and then fight that number one contender. This is why boxing is screwed. I can't think of a better adjective than screwed. This is why so many fans have left boxing and gone to MMA, which, in all honesty, it's like, it's like comparing, a hamburger to a steak. Do you know what I mean? MMA is a cheap alternative to boxing. But with MMA, the champions can't duck and dive, whatever, from the number one contenders. In MMA, you can't have shady promoters like someone that can have 2 fighters in the same match, and yet claim that there's no conflict of interest. You can't have that in MMA. In MMA, you don't have 7 or 8 different, or 6 or 7 belts. You have 1. So when the champion is there, that is the number one guy in the world. In boxing, there have been times where you've had 5 or 6 different world champions at the same weight class. That's just confusing. Why do that? Do you know what I mean? Why? Because it's good for the card, it's good for promoters, they make money. But you can have 5 guys that aren't worth a crap as champions with 1 guy that is, and that's another thing, right? Remember how I talked about how the champion could hide from the number one contender. Well, champions can also hide from champions. And we see that in this upcoming fight between Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather Jr. Two top guys, same weight class, and they've been, dodging each other for years. So, am I happy that they're finally going to fight? Yes and no. Because this fight should have happened 3 or 4 years ago. Okay? And it didn't. And why is it happening now? Well, because these guys are basically about to hang him up. They're about to retire. Okay? So they probably figure, well, we don't want to have an Oscar De La Hoya moment. We don't want to come back 10 years from now. We'll have our comeback now. Both of these guys are pretty much close to retiring. And the only reason they're fighting is probably because the fans are just so sick of it. Boxing is losing so much in terms of ad money, in terms of endorsements, in terms of merchandising. I can't tell you the last time I bought a boxing-related T-shirt. I can't tell you the last time I bought a boxing magazine. And I used to be subscribed to The Ring. But the reality of it is that I don't really care about boxing because at the regional level, the Golden Gloves, local level, that's great. But that's not in the magazines. All you really see in the magazines are these top guys and how these top guys can't get title fights. So it kind of gets tiring after a while to just go with the flow. So I think this fight is a little too late, really. Now people are asking me, who do I think will win? I really think Manny Pacquiao will beat Floyd Mayweather Jr. Pac is faster, he hits harder, he has a higher pain threshold from what I've seen, and Mayweather has fought a lot of powder puffs. His most convincing victory was against Canelo Alvarez. And Canelo Alvarez came close to knocking him out a couple times. I mean, if you look at the points, yeah, Floyd Mayweather had more points. Stick and move. But the few times, it kind of reminds me of that comeback George Foreman made. George Foreman was, older than dirt when he came back. But he fought Holyfield, and Holyfield won decisively. But let me tell you something. When George Foreman had Evander Holyfield in the corner and laid some of those Foreman, punches on him, I gotta tell you, old or not, he was hurting Holyfield. If you go back to that fight and you look at it carefully, every single punch that George Foreman connected really, really, really hurt Holyfield. So he didn't have the speed, but he had the power, and that's kind of like what Canelo Alvarez had. He's a young boxer. When he fought Mayweather, he had a perfect record, I believe, or maybe one loss. But Mayweather picked him because, easy pickings, slim pickings. This guy, he had a near perfect record, but he hadn't really fought anyone of substance. So Mayweather picked him up, and the other reason Mayweather picked him up was because he was being heralded as, he basically had the fan base of he was like the Rocky Marciano or Sugar Ray Leonard of Mexico. Mexico was just up in arms about this guy, and Mayweather wanted to knock him out. He wanted to beat him, and he couldn't knock him out. So he didn't knock him out. He won by technical decision, a split decision actually, because one of the judges actually gave it a split decision. So he didn't even actually win. He won by unanimous decision, but there was a couple of rounds there that this judge split it. So, I forget the name of the judge. It's a woman, and she's under scrutiny from the Nevada Boxing Commission. So it's not like, Canelo really had, a very strong support. But nonetheless, but the thing about it, though, is that, and I don't want to say these guys are going to throw the fight because, I don't want to say that. But why I don't want to say it, I don't know, because it's not like boxing is really all that legitimate of a sport, anyways. But I don't think they would throw the fight. And then why would they? What would be the motivation to do that? I mean, really. But what I do think could happen is I think these guys could push it to a 12-round fight. That I do think they could do. Just kind of be like, let's just surf, a few rounds, because that's another thing. If any of these two guys, either of these guys gets knocked out, go back to the Tyson Sphinx fight, okay? Now Tyson knocked him out, I think 1 minute into the first round in 1988, I believe it was. If that happens between Pacquiao and Mayweather, the guy that goes down, his career is over forever. Number one, my butt. Pound for pound, best in the world, my butt. He's done. He's over it. But not only that, the fans are going to feel gypped. because I'm sure they're going to be charging me. I'm not paying pay-per-view to watch that. That to me is a charade. But I'm sure a lot of people are going to pay for it. And if one of these guys gets knocked out in the first round, yeah, people will finally get the fight they always wanted to see. But boxing will lose another, couple shares, point shares. You know what I mean? They're going to lose magazine sales. They're going to lose merchandising money. They're going to be even less credible in the eyes of these people that are kind of like on the fence right now between MMA and boxing. I mean, again, it also boils down to money. It really boils down to money. And can boxing fill up an arena like it used to? No, it can't. That's why all the boxing matches are always in Vegas. It's not because numbers running is legal, because you can run numbers anywhere. I mean, they've been doing it forever. Even in Vegas, online books are legal. You can call a bookie, it's legal. If you're the kind of guy that wants to gamble, you can find a bookie anywhere. Okay, you can find a bookmaking operation anywhere. They don't hold them in Vegas because of that. They hold them in Vegas because, honestly, that's the only venue they can fill. Because you have so many gamblers in a per square mile, and so many tourists that have money to burn, and so many foreigners that have money to burn. You know how many people come from around the world to Vegas? I mean, if you polled the audience at a Vegas fight, I wouldn't even be surprised if half the people there weren't even Americans, because overseas boxing is still huge, because it hasn't, the reality hasn't quite gotten to them yet. Boxing can still outsell MMA, but again, if one of these guys goes down, the first round or the second round, it's not going to be good for boxing. Now, are these guys going to be, working in concert to kind of stay together? Fighting back and forth for at least 6 rounds? I don't know, because that in and of itself would be a fraud, right? I just think really what we're seeing with this fight is going to be sort of too little, too late. It's going to be two guys that are past their prime, and honestly, I just don't see what possible good could come out of it. If this had been done 3 or 4 years ago, it would have been ideal. Even 2 or 3 years ago, because even 2 or 3 years ago, they were still in their prime. But now they're in the beginning of their decline, and I'm not going to pay pay-per-view. I don't know. Leave a comment below if you intend on paying pay-per-view. I tell you what, I'm not even going to go to a sports bar to watch it there. Like, I don't even want to buy a couple of Michelob's and just sit there. I really honestly don't even want to watch it. Because I think it's a farce, and I think that even though I think Manny Pacquiao is going to win, it's just a waste of time, really. I mean, it's just and then you look at heavyweight boxing also. I mean, it's just really, honestly, what they need to do is they need to unify all the belts and have one federation is what they need to do, and they're never going to do that, ever.